I'm at the lowest point in my life. It feels as if the weight of the world has settled on my shoulders, pressing down so hard that I can hardly breathe. The silence in my small apartment is deafening, a constant reminder of the emptiness that surrounds me. I stare at the walls, once filled with laughter and love, now echoing only the memories of what used to be. I want to scream, to let out the pain that has been bottled up inside me for years, but all that escapes is a whisper of despair. Before I continue, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story reaches. It's funny how life can twist and turn, leading you to places you never thought you'd find yourself. I was once a vibrant woman, full of dreams and aspirations, a voice that could fill a room. But now I feel invisible, as if my existence has been reduced to a mere shadow. My family, the very people who were supposed to uplift me, have turned their backs, leaving me to navigate this cruel world alone. I often wonder how it all went wrong. Was it my fault? Did I speak too loudly, too boldly for their comfort? I remember the days when I was the one who taught them to speak, to express themselves, to stand up for what they believed in. I was the one who encouraged my children to chase their dreams, to never let anyone silence their voices. But somewhere along the way, they forgot that lesson. They built their lives, their families, and left me behind, a relic of a past they no longer wanted to acknowledge. The loneliness is suffocating. I find myself sitting by the window, watching the world go by, wondering if anyone out there remembers me. I feel like a ghost haunting my own life. I often hear laughter from the children playing in the park across the street, their joy a stark contrast to the silence that fills my home. I catch snippets of conversations from neighbors, their lives so full of love and connection, while I remain an outsider looking in. Memories flood my mind, each one a reminder of the love I once had and the family I built with my own hands. I remember the first time I held my daughter, her tiny fingers wrapping around mine, a promise of a beautiful future. I remember the pride I felt when my son took his first steps, the joy radiating from his face as he stumbled toward me. Those moments were filled with hope, laughter, and a sense of belonging. But as the years passed, that belonging faded away, leaving behind a chasm of neglect and abandonment. I often think about the last family gathering I attended. It was a birthday celebration for my eldest grandson. I arrived with a cake I had baked, filled with love and memories of the times I spent in the kitchen teaching my children how to bake. But as I walked into the room, the laughter stopped. Conversations hushed, and I felt the weight of their stares, heavy with judgment and disdain. I stood there, cake in hand, feeling like an intruder in my own family. "Mom, you didn't need to bring anything," my daughter said, her voice strained. "We have everything covered." I forced a smile, but inside, my heart shattered. The cake was a symbol of my love, a piece of my history that I wanted to share with them. Yet all they saw was an old woman trying to cling to her past. I remember the way my hands trembled as I placed the cake on the table, the way my heart raced as I tried to blend into the background, to become invisible once again. The evening dragged on, filled with laughter and stories that I was no longer a part of. I watched as my family shared memories, reminiscing about vacations and holidays, moments I had been a part of but was now excluded from. I felt the tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. As the night wore on, I overheard snippets of conversations that cut deep. "Grandma's getting old," one of my granddaughters said, her voice dripping with condescension. "She doesn't understand how things work anymore." I wanted to shout, to remind them that I was the one who taught them how to speak, how to stand up for themselves, how to be heard. But the words caught in my throat, suffocated by years of silence. I had become the very thing I fought against, an old woman, forgotten and dismissed. It was in that moment, surrounded by my family, yet feeling utterly alone, that I realized the depth of my abandonment. They wanted me quiet, to fade into the background, to become a memory rather than a presence. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, a mere spectator in the story I had once helped to write. As I left that night, the weight of their indifference settled heavily on my heart. I drove home, tears streaming down my face, the pain of rejection cutting deeper than any physical wound. I parked my car and sat in silence, the darkness of the night enveloping me. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of emotions that threatened to drown me. But the next morning, something shifted. I woke up with a sense of determination, a flicker of hope that had been buried beneath the layers of hurt. I realized that I had a story to tell, one that had been silenced for far too long. I had lived through pain, abandonment, and neglect, but I had also experienced love, joy, and resilience. I began to sift through the remnants of my past, searching for the pieces that had been lost. I found old photographs, letters, and trinkets that held memories of a time when I felt valued and loved. Each item sparked a memory, a story waiting to be told. I could feel the weight of my family's expectations lifting, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. As I sorted through my belongings, I stumbled upon an old, dusty box tucked away in the corner of my closet. It was filled with letters from my late husband, words of love and encouragement that had been forgotten over the years. I opened one, and tears streamed down my face as I read his heartfelt words. "You are strong, my love. Never forget the power of your voice." Those words resonated within me, igniting a fire that had long been extinguished. I realized that I had a choice: to remain silent and invisible, or to reclaim my voice and share my story with the world. With each passing day, I began to unravel the threads of my past, piecing together the tapestry of my life. I wrote down my memories, the injustices I faced, and the love that still lingered in my heart. I found solace in the act of writing, a way to express the emotions that had been trapped inside for so long. But the deeper I dug, the more I unearthed secrets that my family had buried. I discovered stories of resilience and betrayal, of dreams deferred and voices silenced. I realized that my family's history was intertwined with my own, a tangled web of love, loss, and the struggle to be heard. As I delved into these memories, I felt a sense of urgency to uncover the truth. I needed to confront the silence that had plagued my family for generations, to bring the buried secrets to light. It was time to break the cycle of abandonment and invisibility, to reclaim my place in the narrative. The journey ahead would not be easy, but I was ready. I could feel the tension building, the suspense of what lay ahead. I knew that the secrets I was about to uncover would change everything, not just for me, but for my family as well. I had spent so long being quiet, allowing others to dictate my worth, but now I was ready to speak. I would no longer be a ghost in my own life. I would reclaim my voice and share my story, not just for myself, but for those who had been silenced before me. I could feel the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a sense of hope and determination. I was ready to face the truth, to confront the injustices that had haunted me for so long. I was ready to uncover the mystery that had been buried deep within my family, to bring it to light and share it with the world. As I sat down to write, I could feel the power of my words flowing through me. I was no longer just an old woman telling her story. I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman reclaiming her voice after years of silence. I had a story to tell, and I was determined to share it, no matter the cost. And so the journey began, a journey of self-discovery, of uncovering the truth, and of finding hope in the darkest of places. I was ready to face the past, to confront the secrets that had haunted me, and to emerge stronger than ever before. My family may have wanted me quiet, but they forgot that I was the one who taught them to speak, and now it was my turn to be heard. I'm sitting here in my small, quiet living room, surrounded by the echoes of memories that seem to whisper to me, reminding me of the life I once had. The walls, once vibrant with laughter and warmth, now feel like a cage, holding me in a world that has forgotten my voice. I often wonder if anyone ever truly saw me, or if I was just a shadow in the background of my own life. I think back to the moments that shaped me, the moments of pain and neglect that carved out a hollow space in my heart. I remember the first time I felt invisible. I was a little girl, standing on the sidelines of my own birthday party, watching as my friends laughed and played. My parents were busy chatting with their friends, oblivious to the fact that I was standing there, yearning for their attention. I had adorned my hair with ribbons and donned my favorite dress, hoping they would notice me, but I was just a ghost in a room full of vibrant colors. That feeling of abandonment clung to me like a shadow, following me through the years. As I grew older, I learned to suppress my feelings. I became an expert at hiding my pain behind a smile, crafting a facade that the world could accept. I poured my heart into my studies, hoping that if I excelled, my parents would finally see me. I wanted to be a doctor, to save lives and make a difference. But with every report card I brought home, I felt the weight of their expectations crushing me. It was never enough. I remember my mother saying, "You must be perfect, dear. We can't afford any mistakes." Those words echoed in my mind like a haunting melody, reminding me that my worth was tied to my achievements. In my heart, I knew I had dreams, but they were overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of perfection. I wanted to be heard, to share my aspirations, but every time I opened my mouth, it felt like I was met with silence. I often found solace in writing, scribbling my thoughts in a journal hidden beneath my bed. It became my safe haven, a place where I could pour out my heart without fear of judgment. But even that felt like a secret I had to keep, a hidden part of me that I couldn't share with the world. The years passed, and I found myself trapped in a cycle of silence. I married young, thinking that perhaps a family of my own would fill the void I felt. I wanted to create a home filled with love and laughter, a place where my children would never feel the way I did. But as time went on, I realized that I was repeating the same patterns. I became a mother who was too busy, too preoccupied with the demands of life to truly see my children. I was so determined to avoid the mistakes of my parents that I ended up making my own. I remember the day my daughter, Lily, came to me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, do you even see me?" she asked, her voice trembling. In that moment, my heart shattered. I had become what I had always feared, an invisible figure in my child's life. I had spent so long trying to be the perfect mother that I forgot to be present. I realized then that I was passing down the very legacy of silence that had haunted me for years. As I reflected on my life, I began to understand the injustices I had faced. I had allowed myself to be silenced, to be molded into someone who conformed to the expectations of others. I had lost my voice in the pursuit of approval, and in doing so, I had lost a part of myself. I felt like a prisoner in my own life, shackled by the weight of my family's expectations. Then one day, while rummaging through an old box in the attic, I stumbled upon something that would change everything. It was a small, faded photograph of my mother, a woman I had always admired but never truly understood. In the picture, she was laughing, her eyes sparkling with joy. It was a side of her I had never seen, a glimpse into the woman she was before the responsibilities of family consumed her. I felt an overwhelming urge to learn more about her, to uncover the layers that had shaped her into the mother I knew. The photograph sparked a fire within me, igniting a desire to dig deeper into my family's history. I began to ask questions, to seek out the stories that had been buried beneath the weight of silence. I reached out to relatives, piecing together the fragments of our past. Each conversation was a revelation, unveiling the struggles and triumphs that had shaped my family. I learned about my grandmother, a fierce woman who had fought for her voice in a world that sought to silence her. I discovered that my mother had once dreamed of being an artist, but those dreams were cast aside in favor of duty and obligation. As I delved into these stories, I felt a connection to the women who had come before me. I realized that our struggles were intertwined, that we were all fighting against the same tide of silence and invisibility. I began to see the strength in our lineage, the resilience that had been passed down from generation to generation. It was a revelation that filled me with hope, a reminder that I was not alone in my battle for recognition. But with each discovery came a wave of guilt. I felt ashamed for not having recognized the sacrifices my mother had made, for not having seen the woman behind the mother. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her how much I understood now, but the years of silence had created a chasm between us that felt insurmountable. I often found myself sitting in the quiet of my living room, tears streaming down my face as I thought about the words left unspoken. I realized that my journey was not just about reclaiming my voice. It was also about understanding the voices of those who had come before me. I wanted to honor their struggles, to ensure that their stories were not forgotten. I began to write again, pouring my heart into the pages as I crafted a narrative that intertwined my life with the lives of the women in my family. It was a cathartic process, one that allowed me to confront my past and embrace the woman I had become. As I wrote, I felt the weight of my family's expectations begin to lift. I was no longer bound by the need for approval. I was free to express my truth. I began to share my writings with my children, inviting them into the world I had created. I wanted them to know that their voices mattered, that they had the power to shape their own narratives. I could see the spark of recognition in their eyes as I shared my stories, a glimmer of understanding that resonated with their own struggles. But I also knew that the journey was far from over. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that there were still secrets lurking in the shadows, waiting to be brought to light. I felt a sense of urgency to confront these truths, to break the cycle of silence that had haunted my family for generations. It was time to uncover the mystery that had been buried deep within our history, to bring it to the surface and share it with the world. As I sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of my past, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to face the truth, to confront the injustices that had shaped my life. I was determined to reclaim my voice, not just for myself, but for the generations of women who had fought for recognition. I could feel the tension building, the anticipation of what lay ahead. I knew that the secrets I was about to uncover would change everything. It was time to break the silence, to reclaim my place in the narrative. I was no longer just an old woman telling her story. I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman ready to speak her truth. And as I embarked on this journey of self-discovery, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. I was ready to embrace the unknown, to confront the shadows that had haunted my family for far too long. I could feel the power of my words flowing through me, a reminder that my voice mattered. I was determined to share my story, to inspire others to reclaim their voices and break the chains of silence. I wanted to remind the world that we are not defined by our past, but by our ability to rise above it. And with each word I wrote, I felt a sense of liberation, a promise to myself that I would never again allow my voice to be silenced. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. I had spent too long being quiet, allowing others to dictate my worth. Now it was my turn to be heard, to reclaim my narrative and share it with the world. I was ready to confront the past, to uncover the secrets that had haunted me, and to emerge stronger than ever before. I could feel the weight of my family's history pressing down on me, but I also felt the strength of the women who had come before me. I was ready to honor their stories, to ensure that their voices were not forgotten. And as I took a deep breath, I knew that I was no longer just a spectator in my life. I was the author of my own story, ready to write the next chapter. I remember the day I found the old, dusty box tucked away in the corner of the attic. It was a small, unassuming thing, covered in cobwebs and forgotten memories. I had been cleaning out the space, trying to make sense of the chaos that had accumulated over the years. As I brushed away the dust, my heart raced with anticipation. I knew that whatever lay inside could hold the key to understanding my family's history, the secrets that had been buried for far too long. With trembling hands, I opened the box, revealing a collection of faded photographs, brittle letters, and trinkets that seemed to whisper stories of the past. Each item felt like a fragile thread connecting me to my ancestors, to the women who had come before me. I could almost hear their voices echoing in the silence of the attic, urging me to uncover the truth. As I sifted through the contents, I stumbled upon a photograph of my mother as a young woman, her eyes sparkling with dreams and aspirations. In that moment, I was transported back to my childhood, to the days when I would sit at her feet, listening to her stories. She had a way of bringing the world to life with her words, painting vivid pictures of adventure and hope. Yet, as I looked at that photo, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. The woman in the picture was so full of life, yet the mother I had known had been overshadowed by the burdens of family and expectation. I continued to rummage through the box, and my fingers brushed against a delicate locket. I opened it, revealing a tiny portrait of a woman I didn't recognize. Who was she? My heart raced as I wondered if she was a distant relative or perhaps a forgotten ancestor whose story had been lost to time. I felt a sense of urgency to uncover her identity, to understand how she fit into the tapestry of my family's history. With each new discovery, I felt the weight of my family's silence pressing down on me. It was as if the voices of the women in my lineage were crying out, begging to be heard. I realized that I had been living in the shadows of their stories, unaware of the struggles and triumphs that had shaped our family. I could almost hear their whispers urging me to dig deeper, to confront the truths that had been hidden for too long. As I delved into the letters, I began to piece together a narrative that had been obscured by years of silence. They spoke of dreams deferred, of love lost, and of the sacrifices made by the women who came before me. I read about my grandmother's struggles as a young mother, her hopes for a better life for her children, and the relentless fight against the societal norms that sought to confine her. Her words resonated with me, echoing the sentiments I had felt throughout my own life. One letter, in particular, caught my attention. It was written by my mother to her sister, filled with raw emotion and vulnerability. She spoke of her desire to break free from the expectations placed upon her, to find her own voice amidst the chaos of family life. As I read her words, I felt a profound connection to her struggle. I understood her longing for freedom, for the chance to express herself without fear of judgment. It was a feeling I had wrestled with for years, trapped in a cycle of silence that had been passed down through generations. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that my family had been caught in a web of unspoken rules and expectations. Women were expected to be quiet, to fade into the background, their voices stifled by the weight of tradition. But I was determined to break that cycle. I could feel the fire within me igniting, urging me to reclaim my voice and honor the stories of the women who had come before me. As I continued my emotional investigation, I found myself reflecting on my own experiences of invisibility. I thought about the moments when I had felt unheard, the times when my opinions had been dismissed or overlooked. It was as if I had been conditioned to believe that my voice didn't matter, that my dreams were not worth pursuing. But now, as I stood in that attic, surrounded by the echoes of my family's past, I felt a shift within me. I was no longer willing to accept that narrative. I decided to confront my family about the secrets that had been hidden for so long. With each passing day, I felt a growing sense of urgency to share what I had discovered. I wanted them to understand the weight of our history, the importance of acknowledging the voices that had been silenced. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Confronting the past often comes with its own set of challenges, but I was ready to take that step. I gathered my family together one evening, my heart pounding with anticipation. As we sat in the living room, I could feel the tension in the air. I took a deep breath, summoning the courage to speak. I found something, I began, my voice trembling slightly. Something that could change everything. I shared the contents of the box, the letters, the photographs, the stories that had been waiting to be told. As I recounted the struggles and triumphs of the women in our family, I watched their expressions shift from confusion to realization. I could see the wheels turning in their minds as they began to understand the weight of our shared history. My daughter, who had always been my biggest supporter, looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I never knew," she whispered. "I had no idea how much they had to endure." Her words struck a chord within me. It was a reminder that the stories we tell shape the narratives of future generations. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, knowing that I was finally breaking the silence. But as I spoke, I also noticed the discomfort on my son's face. He shifted in his seat, his unease palpable. "Mom, why does this matter now?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "What's the point of digging up the past?" I could feel my heart sink. It was a question I had anticipated, one that many might ask when confronted with uncomfortable truths. "Because it matters," I replied, my voice steady despite the hurt I felt. "Our past shapes who we are. If we don't acknowledge it, we risk repeating the same mistakes. I want you to understand the sacrifices made for our family, the strength of the women who came before us." There was a moment of silence, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could see the conflict in my son's eyes, the struggle between wanting to dismiss my revelations and the undeniable truth that resonated within them. It was a pivotal moment, one that would determine whether we could move forward together as a family. As I continued to share the stories, I noticed my husband's expression shift. He had always been my rock, but I could sense his discomfort as well. "Maybe it's time we let the past stay buried," he said quietly. "We can't change what happened." His words stung, but I understood where he was coming from. The past can be a heavy burden to carry, one that many would prefer to leave untouched. But I felt a fire igniting within me, a determination to honor the voices that had been silenced for far too long. "We can't change the past, but we can learn from it," I replied firmly. "We owe it to ourselves and to the generations that follow to confront our history." Slowly, I began to see the shift in their attitudes. My daughter nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with understanding. "I want to know more," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "I want to honor their stories, to ensure they're not forgotten." As I looked around the room, I felt a sense of hope. It was as if the walls that had kept us apart were beginning to crumble, allowing us to connect on a deeper level. The stories of our past were no longer just mine to bear. They were ours, a shared legacy that bound us together. In the days that followed, we began to explore our family history as a unit. We researched, we talked, and we shared our own stories. It was a cathartic process, one that allowed us to confront the pain of the past while also celebrating the resilience of our ancestors. I watched as my family began to embrace their own voices, each of us finding the courage to speak our truths. But amidst the healing, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover. The locket I had found in the attic haunted me, its mystery lingering in the back of my mind. Who was the woman in the portrait? What was her story? I knew deep down that I had to find out. One evening, as I sat at my desk, I decided to dig deeper. I pulled out the photograph and began to search online, hoping to find some clues about her identity. Hours passed as I scoured through archives and family trees, piecing together fragments of information. I felt a sense of urgency, as if the woman in the portrait was calling out to me, urging me to uncover her story. After many late nights of research, I stumbled upon a name that sent a shiver down my spine. The woman in the locket was my great-grandmother, a woman whose existence had been obscured by the passage of time. I couldn't believe it. I felt a rush of emotions flooding over me, joy, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of connection. Through my research, I learned that she had been a trailblazer in her own right, a woman who had defied the conventions of her time. She had fought for her education, for her right to speak, and for the opportunity to create a better life for her children. Her story resonated with me in ways I never expected. It was as if I had finally found the missing piece of my own narrative, a thread that connected me to her struggles and triumphs. As I shared my findings with my family, I could see the impact it had on them. My daughter's eyes sparkled with excitement as she learned about her great-grandmother's courage. "This is incredible, Mom. We have to honor her memory," she said, her voice filled with passion. In that moment, I realized that the journey was not just about uncovering the past, it was about creating a legacy for the future. We began to plan a family gathering, a celebration of our history, where we could share the stories of the women who had shaped our lives. It was a chance to honor their voices and ensure that they would never be forgotten again. As the day of the gathering approached, I felt a mix of emotions: excitement, nervousness, and a deep sense of gratitude. I had spent so many years feeling invisible, but now I was ready to stand in the light, to share my story and the stories of the women who had come before me. I wanted my family to understand the importance of their voices, to know that they mattered. The day of the gathering arrived, and as I looked around at my family, I felt a sense of pride. We had come together to celebrate our shared history, to honor the women who had fought for their voices to be heard. As we shared stories, laughter, and tears, I felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a sense of connection and understanding. And in that moment, I realized that I was no longer just an old woman telling her story. I was a vessel for the voices of my ancestors, a bridge between the past and the future. I had reclaimed my narrative, and in doing so, I had given my family the gift of their own voices. As the gathering came to a close, I stood up to speak. If my story touched you, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people never give up on hope, I said, my heart full of gratitude. I knew that our journey was just beginning, and together we would continue to honor the stories that had shaped our lives. The journey of self-discovery and healing was ongoing, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had broken the silence, and in doing so, I had created a space for my family to find their own voices. We were no longer bound by the weight of the past. We were free to embrace our stories and share them with the world. And as I looked around at the faces of my family, I knew that we would carry the legacy of our ancestors forward, ensuring that their voices would never be forgotten again.